What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with another video. I received a great subscriber question here recently that I thought would make a great long-form video. But before I dig into it, I want to disclose that we're going to be going through a wide range of topics that touch not only on Star Wars, but a number of other Disney properties. My only request is that you watch the video, and if you decide to comment below, let's keep the conversation civil. I'm only presenting information, interjecting my opinion where I feel it's a good spot to. But at the end of the day, this is really just to create a thought-provoking video and let you, the viewer, decide how you feel about it. Now, let's go ahead and dig into the question.
Joe Schmo asks, do you feel the anger fans have towards Star Wars and Disney currently will affect future prices of current and vintage figures? This is a great question that started me thinking more broadly about all of the Star Wars content that has been released since Disney acquired Lucasfilm and the Star Wars brand. Are fans really angry? The massive mainstream success of The Mandalorian has led to some pretty significant changes in the direction that Disney is taking with future Star Wars content. How did we get where we are today, and what mistakes did Disney make pre-Mandalorian that led to the recent improvements with the brand? How have Star Wars collectibles been affected by all of this? What does the future for Star Wars collecting look like? And finally, there are more important outside factors such as politics and other hot-button topics that are major risks, in my mind, to not only the Star Wars brand, but with all of the other properties owned by Disney.
I think in order to answer Joe's question properly, we need to look at what Disney has done right and what Disney has done wrong since they acquired Lucasfilm and the Star Wars brand. So let's go into the Wayback Machine and take a look at all the movies that Disney has released since they acquired Lucasfilm.
Disney had a massive hit on its hands with The Force Awakens. The continuation of the Skywalker saga reeled in a new generation of Star Wars fans while mostly satisfying original ones. The movie was highly derivative, however, with a ton of recycled plot points. But fans mostly looked past these issues and the movie did well. In my opinion, Rogue One represents the best of the Disney films to date, but the movie was more of a war film in the vein of Guns of Navarone versus a true space opera. But this movie is highly underrated in my opinion. The first major mistake by Disney was The Last Jedi. While commercially successful, many fans were angered by Luke Skywalker's jaded, hermetic portrayal. The movie had a completely unnecessary side story with Rose and Finn, and the blatant discussion of income inequality in the casino scene on Canto Bight that turned off many fans in a major way. Despite huge earnings, the box office numbers do support the idea that the shift in character tone and hints at politics turned fans off. While The Last Jedi went on to gross $1.3 billion worldwide, the massive drop in box office totals from week 1 to week 2 was much higher than that of The Force Awakens. Whether the implied politics in the movie played a role in this drop is debatable. It could be that The Last Jedi just couldn't live up to the unrealistic expectations after the huge success of The Force Awakens. Nevertheless, a lot of industry experts blame The Last Jedi, at least in part, on the failure of Disney's next Star Wars film. Solo, a Star Wars story, is when Disney's decisions really took a turn for the worse. The movie completely bombed at the box office, with the officially reported loss on the film totaling $77 million. There are whispers that Disney's loss on Solo was much higher. Superficially, much of the media blamed the loss on a bad release date and the acting choice for Han Solo, but I think some other elements were at play. The movie went through a change in director mid-production, hinting at internal problems with filming and the direction of the movie. The finished product felt uneven as a result. Lando's annoying droid, L337, also brought politics front and center again, with an ill-conceived side story featuring themes of women's rights, droid slavery and rebellion, and other political issues that seemed unnecessary and contrived. Finally, The Rise of Skywalker released in late 2019 to a mixed reception. J.J. Abrams very wisely set politics to the side, avoiding the mistakes of The Last Jedi and Solo. Rise of Skywalker attempted to use retroactive continuity to fix the plot issues and Luke's character changes in The Last Jedi. The most interesting aspect of The Rise of Skywalker is that there was a very noticeable drop in the price of vintage and modern Star Wars collectibles in early 2020. Whether it was just a short breather in prices after a very strong run dating back to The Force Awakens, fans being tired of the annual new movie releases, or anger with Disney's overall direction of the franchise is anyone's guess. I tend to think that the early 2020 price drop was a combination of all of these factors. This dip was short-lived though, and we will dive into that in more detail later on. I feel like the mainstream success of The Mandalorian can be broken down into several key factors. First, Jon Favreau was the creator, the writer, and the producer on The Mandalorian. He essentially had full control, with fairly minimal interference from Disney. He was allowed to tell the stories that he wanted to. The show clearly stayed away from the mistakes of the Disney films. Favreau didn't make any major changes to existing characters. He avoided any sort of identity politics, and he didn't make the retcon mistakes that we saw in The Rise of Skywalker. Add in the fact that Favreau sprinkled in just enough fan service in Season 1. The Biker Scout and the Imperial Troop Transport come to mind. Combine that with the fact that The Mandalorian is essentially a hybrid of a Clint Eastwood Western and a space opera. All of these factors blended together perfectly to create mainstream pop culture appeal. But let's be real for a second too. The Mandalorian didn't suffer from the same expectation pressures as the new trilogy did. Favreau was essentially creating new characters within the Star Wars universe, so he had much more leeway than Disney's Skywalker saga films did.
And after a string of nothing but success, controversy finally struck The Mandalorian.
After Gina Carano used Twitter to compare Nazi Germany's treatment of Jews to people punishing those with right-wing viewpoints, the reaction was instantaneous. The actress also dove into the pandemic and the U.S. mask debate, among many other topics. Lucasfilm wasted little time in firing her, and as expected, people were either glad Carano got fired or expressed support for her.
Make no mistake, Disney's a company, and if they feel like Gina Carano is hurting their brand with some of her controversial tweets, then they absolutely have the right to fire her. The problem is, Pedro Pascal did the exact same thing, and Disney had no response.
Carano fans were quick to point out old tweets by Pascal that compared supporters of Donald Trump with Nazis and Civil War Confederates. He also compared the immigration border debate in the U.S. with Nazi concentration camps. Unlike with Gina Carano, Disney and Lucasfilm were completely silent on these tweets, and the issue was swept under the rug by most of the mainstream media. Nevertheless, the implication is interesting. If Disney agrees with your politics, everything is just fine. If Disney disagrees, you're fired.
While Disney certainly can't impede on people's right to free speech doesn't necessarily mean right to a job. And if you say something stupid, they have the right to fire you. But I guess my problem with it is Disney is being inconsistent with how they handle their different stars on The Mandalorian. And these hot button issues are not just a Star Wars problem. Disney's other major brand, Marvel, as well as other superhero brands, are diving headlong into politics.
Just this month, DC Comics is introducing the newest Batman, Tim Fox. He's the son of Lucius Fox. And it's set in an alternate future city of Gotham called Future State. DC is going all in with Future State across every one of their superhero franchises. The series dives headlong into the recent mask controversy that swept through the 2020 U.S. presidential election cycle. In the Future State Batman series, for example, the mayor of Gotham hires a paramilitary force called the Magistrate to hunt down and eliminate anyone wearing masks. The not-so-subtle nod to the pandemic that bogged down much of the 2020 political season in the U.S. seems shoehorned at best and an unnecessary, if not unwanted, look into recent politics at worst. I mean, I personally find the concept of an African-American Batman very cool and a great way to refresh the franchise. But isn't Tim Fox's portrayal as the next Batman cool enough on its own? Is injecting recent political controversy running the risk of turning off some of DC Comics' most supportive fans? These are multi-billion-dollar franchises, and dabbling in recent political events seems like a poor financial decision. And isn't that what all of this is about? To appeal to as many consumers as possible and to make as much money as possible? And now let's shift back to one of Disney's own companies, Marvel. Marvel has recently publicly stated that there will be a bigger push for diversity in their superheroes moving forward, which, it's certainly a welcome addition in my opinion if it's done the right way. But the problem is that Marvel has tried this before, even admitting publicly that the reception was poor. Here are two headlines from the same news source, The Guardian, which is a left-leaning member of the media. Just 4 years ago, a vice president at Marvel admitted that fans felt alienated by the push into diversity and identity politics, and as a result, sales plummeted. Yet almost exactly 4 years later, the same publication discusses Marvel's decision to make Captain America their first openly gay superhero. What has changed in 4 years? Personally, I don't particularly care whether Marvel decides to make one of their top franchises a member of the gay community or not. In fact, most of my closest friends are part of the gay community. But has consumer demand warranted this decision by Marvel? Is Marvel doomed to repeat past mistakes by shoving identity politics into the faces of paying customers? Disney's leaders answer to their shareholders, the people that own Disney. These executives' jobs are to make their valuable brands as appealing to as wide an audience as possible. Is infusing politics the best way to do that when history has already shown that customers don't want it? Make no mistake, I think we can all agree that times have certainly changed from a worldwide cultural perspective in the last 4 years. But I just question whether inserting hot button or controversial topics into what is supposed to be a form of entertainment makes financial sense for these properties. Marvel needs to look no further than the massive success of their latest Spider-Man, Miles Morales. Morales is a perfect example of Marvel creating a likable character with interesting stories, a great supporting cast, dynamic villains. Oh, and he just happens to be a minority. As you can see by the recent eBay sales prices of his first appearance comic, Morales is a huge success and wildly popular among consumers. The key point I want to make is that Miles Morales Spider-Man comics haven't really focused on politics. The franchise is focused on what customers want, and that is Spider-Man being Spider-Man. People don't care what his skin color is, they just want great storytelling. Marvel, and more consequently Disney, should take a step back and examine how to inject more diversity into all of their properties the correct way, and Miles Morales serves as the perfect template.
Maybe I'm overthinking this. Maybe it's a natural reaction for a lot of these content providers to explore the cultural significance of these hot button issues in their media. But I guess the question is what's good for the collective conscience good for the bottom line? Now, back to Joe's original question. What about the toys?
As I already covered at length in my collectibles asset bubble video, the prices on Star Wars comics, trading cards, and action figures are at all-time highs, with prices for some items doubling or tripling in a matter of weeks. How much of these price jumps are due to people not spending discretionary income on travel, dining out, and live events versus a renewed interest in the Star Wars brand due to Disney's success with The Mandalorian is anyone's guess. I personally feel like it is some combination of both factors. But there's no denying that the fact that whatever missteps Disney has made so far with the Star Wars franchise has not affected collectibles prices in a negative way. At least not yet. The Gina Carano firing due to her personal politics and the effect on her toys was interesting to see play out in the collectibles market. After Lucasfilm fired her, you wonder if they put pressure on Hasbro to stop producing any more of her action figures. She was well represented across the Vintage Collection and Black Series, and Hasbro did confirm that her Retro Collection figure will still be released in May. But how much money, if any, did Hasbro lose by being more than likely forced to stop producing her figures? The immediate aftermath of Hasbro announcing that no additional TVC and Black Series would be made led to a rush by collectors on her action figures, sending prices for both graded and ungraded examples soaring. What was once a low-demand figure immediately became a hot item. Were these massive price jumps a show of support for Gina Carano's right-wing political beliefs? Or was it simply collectors wanting to complete their collections and panic buying at ridiculous prices? After Hasbro shipped their remaining inventory, prices have come back down to earth, yet still remain around triple their retail prices. But what about moving forward? Did Hasbro learn anything from the Cara Dune fiasco? And how will the controversy affect future character releases in their various Star Wars toy segments? How will other collectibles licensees, like Hot Toys, Topps, and even Disney's own Marvel, change which characters are featured based on someone's personal opinions shared on political or cultural issues? And as we talked about already with Marvel specifically, their own stated initiative appears to be that they want to embrace diversity and cultural issues in their comics. But will toy makers avoid these potential pitfalls in order to maximize consumer demand? In terms of Hasbro's recent announcements about upcoming Star Wars collectibles, some of their planned releases are not surprising. The 50th anniversary Black Series Obi-Wan Kenobi, Jawa, and Greedo are all safe bets to sell very well and rely on iconic characters with classic Kenner-style packaging. What was a little bit surprising, at least to me, were the recently announced 50th anniversary comic book figures. While Darth Maul and Luke Skywalker are relatively straightforward choices, the other choices were not as obvious, and a calculated risk by Hasbro that collectors want something a little bit different. But even with those figures, all 4 of the new releases are being assembled using mostly existing molds and parts from other figures, as pointed out by Jedi Business. Still, these kinds of small but welcome risks by Hasbro give me hope that they simply won't play it safe for the remainder of 2021 and into 2022.
So, did the success of The Mandalorian save the Star Wars brand for Disney? Well, that answer is complicated, and we don't really know yet.
While The Mandalorian has proven to be a huge success and restored some, if not most, of the goodwill that eroded after past Disney mistakes, the future for Star Wars seems bright. But Disney apparently feels like they can go from 5 miles an hour to 200 miles an hour after announcing no less than 10 new Star Wars programs for 2021 and 2022. My biggest question is whether Disney can avoid the pitfalls of past failures like Solo and stay away from politics. Can they avoid public controversies with actors representing the brand? Can they tiptoe around political and cultural issues instead of shoving these topics into fans' faces? Finally, will Disney's product partners take a wait-and-see approach to see which shows are a hit and which ones are a dud before putting out new collectibles? Having toy releases simultaneously with the upcoming new shows would create a sort of symbiotic relationship, giving both Disney and their partners a better chance for success. But that comes with more risk for Hasbro and other collectibles partners, potentially flooding the market with too much product.
At the end of the day, it's going to be interesting to see whether Disney learned from their past mistakes with the Star Wars brand and the success of The Mandalorian for their content moving forward. And the great news is, we're along for the ride. If you enjoyed this content, please be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you again for watching, and I'll be back soon.